This is House Planning Help, episode 148. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and try to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up today, I've got a case study with Dean Scott. Now, Dean, at the time of recording this, didn't have land. However, we're hoping that that is going to change very, very soon, maybe even by the time you're listening to this. So I brought him on because he's really done his homework, and I think this is going to be interesting, particularly if you're someone who's worried about, can I go through this? Have I got the funds? Am I confident enough? Well, I think Dean's got some pearls of wisdom to share today. Also, a big thank you to him because he was my first ever hub member. And this was late 2015. I'd launched the hub and it had been perhaps 6 weeks, a couple of months. Crickets. Nobody had signed up. Why was nobody signing up? Well, I got the answer when Dean emailed me and said, I've been trying to join the hub for a little while now and I keep getting this error message, won't accept my credit card. And yes, of course, there was a bug in the system, and by the sounds of it, quite a major one. How we hadn't spotted that, I have no idea. So doubly thank you to Dean. He's also a blogger with his other half, Hannah, and they blog on family life and self-build as they go through their project. You're going to hear more details about this very soon. In fact, let's just get going, shall we? First question I asked him was, when did he come up with the idea that he wanted to build his own house?
I think it's something that has been on my mind for as long as I can remember, really. So Hannah and I got together 10 years ago, and we've always watched Grand Designs. We've always watched Building the Dream, whatever. But we've never bought a house, simply because we've never been able to find somewhere that we were both really excited about. And so I suppose the logical conclusion from that is if you can't find something you want to buy, you're going to have to build it yourself. So that's always been the case. So yeah, I think we've always wanted, and we're engineers, and it's like the ultimate project for an engineer is to design and build your own house. So I don't think it's anything that sort of like just switched and we suddenly thought, let's try self-build. I think it's just something we've always tended towards.
It's amazing how many self-build projects have people with engineering experience in, or I think you're right, it's just something that you're maybe tuned into. So how did you start to make this a reality? What were the practical steps to just get moving?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me has always been looking at the finances, because you watch Grand Designs and they've always got a pot of money somewhere, and there's always an extra pot, and they keep going. But I think the key thing for us is that we have a very finite budget. And if we go over it, there is no more. And so that has always been the starting point, is can we realistically afford to do this? So that has sort of been the start. But in a way, sort of designing the house has kind of been the easy bit, because, that's the bit that you can sit and daydream about. But, if you get the numbers wrong, the finances, then it's all for nothing, really. So that has been, for me, the starting point.
And as well, I know quite a bit about your story. I've also been to a presentation that you gave and was really impressed of how deep you went, because I have found on the whole that my project has drifted in terms of numbers because of what I feel we should be building. So whereas it started quite low, it's gone higher and higher. So what sort of checks did you do? How did you start to put that budget together and to really stress test it?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one, putting the budget, because in the presentation, actually, I went through a bit which I call the self-builder's loop, where you kind of say, well, what sort of house do we want to build? Well, it sort of depends on, first of all, where we're going to build it. But, that sort of depends on how much you're going to spend. But that depends on what sort of house you want, which depends on, where you're going to build it. And you sort of go round and round in circles. For us, it was really a case of, I suppose in some ways, actually, for us, it's quite simple because we're relying on our cash savings. So we know how much money we've actually got in the bank. We're renting at the moment, and we always have, so we don't have any assets to consider. So we're just looking at our cash. And then it was a case of discussing with BuildStore, mortgage broker, to look at what we would realistically be able to borrow. And so that really came down to what our earnings were and our outgoings at the moment. And that sort of built a picture of what the total pot would look like. And so that was the basis really for the budget. And then from there, we looked at, okay, so what size of house would we realistically want to build? and then work back from that to see, does that then fit in with the pot of money that we potentially have? And I have to say, actually, it's kind of fortuitous that they did kind of align up, and the money that we think we've got available sort of matches the size and type of house that we think we'd be able to build. When it will be really tight, and all that is sort of saying that's what we've got now. How is that going to change over, the course of the build and all the rest of it? So that's been a big part of it, is planning sort of cash flow and things like that.
And all of these numbers, they hinge on things like jobs and circumstances circumstances that you think you've predicted. Yeah. What about land then? You've got your overall pot of cash, and I know where you ended up with. Maybe you can take us on that. But could you really have afforded land in Oxfordshire, which is a very expensive area?
Yeah, I don't think so at all. I mean, what you're alluding to is that we've ended up sort of looking at Graven Hill, which I don't really believe in fate as such. I'm an engineer. I look at things very logically. But then I sort of think, well, this thing has sort of arrived almost on our doorstep. And pretty much the right time when we're realistically looking to self-build. And it probably is, because I remember looking at all the options, or looking at the plot finding websites and seeing what was around. And, around here, as you say, everything is sort of effectively way out of budget. Then sort of thinking, well, okay, if we moved to a different area, maybe we could be able to afford something. But the only option really came down to then, realistically, for this area was with Graven Hill. And so that's kind of where we focused everything. And then there was the big wait to see, okay, what will the plot prices actually be? Will they be affordable for us? And I think they sort of are. But again, we still need to sort of go through more detail.
Just aligning where you are now and the lifestyle that you have, you're in a very oldie country village compared to where you will be. You happy with that? I know that you don't really have a choice.
Well, that is true, actually. Yeah, I think I am happy. I think Hannah is too. I think that's one of the things with Graven Hill, is that it's not going to be, your typical housing estate. It's going to be a housing estate, but for self-builders. And so, yeah, I'm really comfortable with that. That's one of the big draws for me. It's one of the exciting things. It's not just us building a house in the middle of nowhere. We are potentially going to be part of, building a community. And that is really exciting, I think. If we were building in, a village like this or in the countryside, it wouldn't have the same kind of excitement to it, maybe. I'm sort of looking forward, if we do this, it's a big leap because we might not be able to do it yet, but if we do it, I'm really quite excited about the community aspect of it.
This is going to be an experience. In a way, I like the idea of just building on that little plot with a beautiful view with nothing else around it. But in some ways, I'm slightly jealous of what you will be going through. And I think you're right that it will be an experience one way or another.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any self-build project is going to have highs and lows, but to be able to share those with other people, I think is going to be quite exciting. And I'm really, really excited to see the sort of, the variation in houses. No two houses really are going to be the same. I mean, there's going to be a lot of sort of the turnkey houses, I expect, from Pot and places like that. So there may be a sort of, you may be able to spot some styles which are quite similar, but, no two are going to be identical. I think that's really exciting.
Have you had to approach this in a different way than if you just did have that plot that you were going to develop?
Well, I mean, clearly you don't have a lot of the headaches. So when it comes to getting the services, planning permission, all those sort of preparations that you would have to normally do, not really going to be a part of it. Yeah, from that point of view, it's different, and you can sort of concentrate on the house and on the budget side of actually building rather than worrying about the ground conditions. But apart from that, I suppose then actually the design of the house and the build and all the rest of it would be the same. It's just that the planning, preparation has all been done for you ahead of time.
Before we just go back to finances and also look at the design that you're thinking might work or what groundwork has gone into that, Graven Hill itself, you're not guaranteed this plot. I think in time you are, but how has the ride been for you in terms of getting this piece of land? It's an odd one. It's not the same land worry, but it's a different worry.
Yeah, so at the moment, as things stand, we don't have a plot. We have spoken to the sales team at Graven Hill, and we have expressed interest in a specific plot. In actual fact, we expressed interest in a couple of plots, and we didn't get our first choice. We got our second choice. When I say got, what they've done is they've put it on hold for us. And we've got a meeting with them this week, actually, on Friday, to hopefully look at actually reserving the plot officially. But to get to this point so far, it has been quite a long process, because we seriously looked at it, I think probably summer last year. So it's been a year of sort of, waiting and waiting and waiting. I mean, there's been a couple of sort of false starts from Graven Hill. Where they sort of promise, prices will be available, and then they've not been. But they have now become available. So, they got there in the end.
So what did you have to put up front for this? I know that they were quite clever in a way about some of the things that would stop people coming in and exploiting the community.
Well, part of the requirements from Graven Hill is that you have looked at the design, you have looked at the budget, and so you're not just sort of turning up and saying, yeah, we fancy buying that plot, here's our deposit. And they want to see that you've actually got a house design, a concept at least, and some drawings, and that you've got a realistic budget together, and that you've thought about the finances. So you can't just sort of, I think, turn up and buy a plot. You've got to have thought about it. And so that's really been the bulk of the work that we've been doing over the last 6 months, is putting that together.
What about this house then? What have you decided you would like?
Well, thanks to your podcast, we are committed, I think at this stage, to a passive house design, which all makes perfect sense. And we want something that is contemporary, because we're living in quite an old house now, but it's never really been our sort of aim to live in an old house. We're in the old part of the house now, and there is sort of damp and it's quite chilly. We want to basically eliminate that and live in a very comfortable environment. And yeah, we want something that is a bit different. We don't want a sort of a standard red brick pointy roof kind of house. And so yeah, I can talk about some of the designs we've come up with our architect so far. But yes, it won't be a pointy roof type of house.
And is this just something intuitively that you like, or how have you gathered together a mood board or know the area that you're aiming at, or is this something the architect has suggested to you?
We have, top tip, go on to Pinterest and lose a few days on there. So that's something we have been doing. I think instinctively, certainly from my perspective, because I'm an engineer, I'm really interested in efficiency. And I sort of thought, well, if you're going to build a house, then you want to maximise the living space and to keep it as efficient as possible from a thermal point of view. And so that's the sort of brief when we went to speak to Tom Grieford, the architect we've been speaking to. And that was a sort of brief that we went to him with. And the concept he came back to us was a cube, basically. So maximise all the space, so there's no sort of loft space that you're not able to use. And from a thermal point of view, short of having a sphere, it's it's pretty much sort of the most efficient sort of shape for a single detached house. I think I'm not an expert on passive house, but I think it's it's one of the most efficient shapes. And so the concept he came up with was a cube, and we sort of we'll try and follow that through in all the design elements. So I think it's quite nice. So windows will be square, for example, and maybe some of the room layouts will sort of have a square element to them. So that's the concept he's come up with, and I'm quite excited about that.
How have you budgeted all of these different things? Have you had a serious chat with Tom, or what has nailed down all of these costs? Yeah,
so we've obviously been speaking to Tom and also Trunk Low Energy Design. They are quite keen to work together with a new venture that they're running to build passive houses. So we've done a sort of a quick run through, if you like, of the costings. You're just looking at the square meterage, the size of the house that we're looking at, putting some basic costs in. But again, because we didn't want to spend a lot of money at this stage, that's been quite a limited process. But it's given us some ballpark figures, and then we've sort of compared that with what we think would be a reasonable budget. And to sort of build our breakdown, we've been using like a typical cost per square metre, which I think we were using something around £1,400 a square metre to sort of give us a ballpark. And that's what we've been using, sort of, see if it fits in with our overall budget. And compared with the numbers that we got back from the analysis, we would probably be over budget. And so when it comes to the final details, we are going to have to be very careful about how we put that together. When you start adding all the bits up, you realise just how easy it is to get to your whatever it is. I think we had 180,000 put aside for our build budget, and just how quickly you can get to that. But the trouble is, at this stage, until you've got that final plot and you've gone through the full process, you don't know, or you don't want to spend too much time on it, because time is money. If you're paying someone to do a cost analysis on something that's a bit sketchy, it's sort of money down the drain, really. So we paused it at that point until we got the plot, and then we will go through that process again.
Do you think this is a more affordable way for you to buy a house if you had put aside this self-build dream? I know there's a lot more involved in this. So there's effort and there's consideration. But is it actually allowing you to buy something better than perhaps you might do on the market at the moment?
I'm totally convinced that's the case. To buy something on the open market, we would be spending probably the same sort of money, but we wouldn't be buying anything that we wouldn't buy a passive house. We'd be, buying a bog standard sort of, pointy roof house, red brick. And nothing against that, but, it's not what we want. So yeah, I'm absolutely convinced. And we, by going to passive house, we will obviously spend a little bit more than you could get away with. But we're really committed to sort of the long-term, vision for the house. So we want to get the structure right and then build it up from there.
What else have you learnt along the way? There's a lot of research that goes into a house build. Everything sounds like it's under control, but what's really helped you? What would you recommend to others just starting out?
The one thing that's really sort of struck me by looking at the numbers was realising how the cash flow worked. Particularly if like us, you're going to be relying heavily on a mortgage, and particularly a self-build mortgage, where if you're going for an arrears-based mortgage, which is what we would probably be looking at, you have to allow for the fact that you've got to build to the next stage before the funds are released to you, which obviously sounds a bit backwards when you're completely new to all this. But obviously that means you've got to have enough cash up front to get to each stage. So yeah, that was a real eye-opener for us. And there are times when we were looking at them and thinking, crikey, we can't possibly do this, because, we were sort of thinking, well, we've got this money, so we're fine. But then you think, hang on, that money's got to get us to, say, the water or weather-tight structure before we get, a release to get to the next stage. So, crikey, how much money do we need? We've got to buy, the foundations, we've got to buy the plot, we've got to have spent money on fees, and we've got to have built the timber frame. So that's the cash we actually need. It's not just getting the plot or, whatever else. And so that has been the bulk of my work, really, is looking at how do we manage the cash flow and how do we plot a way through this that makes sense. So, yeah, don't just think that because you've got a lump of cash and you can borrow a certain amount of money, therefore you're fine. You need the money at the right time, which I know is fairly obvious, but until you start
some of these things
at the
aren't
details,
I feel that no matter how much money you have as well, that you can still get into a dangerous position, because particularly if you're in areas that can swallow up the cash, even with just a piece of land, you can get yourself carried away because you don't get much for your money in some of these places. So I think that anyone on any budget can get into dangerous territory. Let's just bring in family side here. That Hugo, your son, born a month or a couple of months ago now.
10 weeks ago, yeah.
So has that changed anything? You're putting a lot of cash effort into this. You're a busy dad. You told me you just got back from work at 7 o'clock. So what does this mean for him? Or is he in part of the journey here on Graven Hill?
I think it's, when I really think about it, he's probably like one of the biggest parts of all this, because a few years ago, I sort of thought, we want to build a house. So maybe, a bit like yourself, you sort of thought, maybe I'll research it for a few years and then we can start looking into it. And so it got to the point where we were starting a family. And I thought, well, I don't want to sort of be doing this when he's like 10. I want him to be living in the house and for us to sort of live as a family in the house. So that's sort of been a bit of an impetus really to get on with it. And that's why, again, Graven Hill is so appealing, because, I know you've spent quite a long time looking for a plot, and I don't really want to sort of go through 3 or 4 years of plot finding and then looking at planning permission, and then sort of it's 7 years down the line that we actually get to start. And I want to get on with it now, so that when he's sort of really growing up, he's going to be in the house and we can live as a family. And that's the sort of push for me to sort of get started. And that's why I'm so keen that we sort of get involved as early as possible at Graven Hill.
Well, I think you've done a lot of research and you certainly deserve for this to go well. Maybe just finally we can talk about how have you and Hannah worked together? Any tips that you have there as working as a couple? Because there have been times where I've found it tough in a couple with, Kay's very good and she's brilliant at organising and all this, but sometimes there are challenging moments. So what tips do you have?
Oh, Pinterest is a good one.
I love that, the first tip.
Yeah, set up a Pinterest board that you can share, and you can both put things on there and you can see what the other's doing. I mean, sharing information, I suppose, is key. And so, in modern technology, the way it is, there's so many tools for you to be able to share stuff. We use Google Docs a lot, so we can share spreadsheets, we can share documents. So I think sort of setting that sort of stuff up, getting yourself a project folder on Google Drive or something where you can sort of collaborate, if you like. Yeah, I think that's really key, is just you need to understand what each of you really wants. And we've been quite fortunate. We sort of want the same things. I'm not sure how it would work if Hannah wanted like a quaint thatch cottage and I wanted like ultra modern. I'm not sure how we would work that, to be honest. I really don't know. We've been really fortunate. We want the same thing. So, yeah, I don't know what sort of tip to give on that. But, at some point, you've obviously got to bring all that together.
You see, there's a side of me that would actually build anything now. I think to begin with, I would have had very rigid views. But so if Kay does want a particular type of house, even if it's the red brick stuff, I'd be quite happy with that. I just want to experience the build process, what it's like to live in a passive house, just to really understand it from that perspective. So who knows on that one? Yeah,
I think something like passive house is quite an easy thing to sort of agree on, isn't it? I mean, who wouldn't want to live in a passive house given the choice? So we've not had to sort of convince each other on that. But then you're right. You could say, as long as it's passive house, I don't really care what it looks like on the outside, as long as it's warm, comfortable on the inside, and sort of makes sense for us to live as a family, which is the other big thing. You can design by self-building, you can lay it out exactly as you like. And as long as you've got a combined vision on that, then, yeah, you're right. Maybe it doesn't really matter what it looks like on the outside.
Well, good luck on this plot. Keep me updated. It'd be great to check in with you again, perhaps next time with Hannah, and we'll sort out a babysitter or grandparent.
We've got grandparents not too far away, so we can, I'm sure, organise that. Yeah.
Dean, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Head online to take a look at the show notes that accompany this session, houseplanninghelp.com/148, where you can review the key points. We'll also link you across to deanandhannah.com. On that homepage, they have a link across to a Facebook group that they've created just to gather together like-minded self-builders who are interested in Graven Hill and are perhaps going to be tackling a project, or maybe they just want to discuss certain aspects, share news, tips, whatever it might be. Going through that process sounds like a very, very good idea. So you can join Dean's Facebook group. Dean is also on Twitter, All of this will link up in the show notes today, houseplanninghelp.com/148. Let's finish up today. We've got some new content in the hub, and this is on our second case study. Very excited about this. It's Buckinghamshire Passive House. And in this first video, we look at the plot and what is going to happen and how. This is interesting because they wanted to do a retrofit. The clients that bought this house, they thought, very easy, we're going to extend and renovate. However, it actually wasn't so easy. And it's not as if Janet Cottrell, the architect, doesn't have a lot of experience when it comes to retrofitting. And I think she and Adam, who they worked together at Passive House Homes, did that award-winning retrofit a few years back. So Janet knows how to do this, and she sized up 2 different projects, tackling the retrofit and then looking at the new build option. And just again, particularly the VAT was a big swaying factor that you can claim back the 20% VAT. So we cover all of that in this video. Also in the hub, if you're not signed up yet, we got the modules, we got the progress calls and the private member forum. houseplanninghelp.com/join if you want to find out more. Next time, Paul Buckingham from Sustainable Lifestyles is my guest, and he's been trying to help some volume house builders improve their airtightness. Well, it hasn't gone down too well, so a slightly different episode coming next time. I hope you can join me for that one. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.